morning, everyone. Good morning, Carla.
Morning.
Welcome to episode 2 of this podcast collection I call Claysinging Studio. I am Lori Moore, just a regular gal with a perfect life and nothing to complain about. At least that is what I should remember every day, right? But to be more specific, I have committed my life to creating a permanent homestead for my family, both older generations and new, so that it may become an ancestral land where future generations are born, nurtured, and centered for life when and as needed, and where they eventually return to the earth. My prayer is that each generation improves this space based on their evolved wisdom. Carla Atherton is a dear friend of mine and an expert in her field. She's the director of Healthy Family Formula, curator of Carla Atherton Inspired, author of Family Health Revolution, host of the Children's Health Summit, and all-around great thinker. Welcome again, Carla.
Thanks for having me again, Lori. So excited.
You're right. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling really good. I'm really, really good. Despite the fact that my light broke, for interviews, and I couldn't quite get it together to get here on time, but perfect otherwise. It's been a great, glorious day. Sun shining, a little bit of snow, it's all good.
Oh, is it? Oh, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. So we promised each other we would try to keep this within 30 minutes to bring our listeners something real condensed
succinct.
And just good. So today's topic was something I was inspired to talk about after listening for like the umpteenth time to Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief and also The Wisdom of Cells, both easy listens on Audible. And he uses this phrase to contain this idea around how we exist either in a state of protection or growth. And that more importantly, we really cannot do both at the same time. And he was actually referring to the cells when he mentioned this. So, and then he would elaborate. So let me start there. Our cells, the cells in our body, can either be in a state of growth or protection. And he was using this as an analogy for the whole person, because that's what he does repeatedly through the book, is compare how one cell contains and resembles the whole person.
Mm-hmm.
I took this further in my own thinking, and I'm sure he did too, that the one person also contains and resembles the organized collective. So the community or the household and the community, our society, and
keep going.
The globe, right? And beyond.
Yep. The universe, baby. Yeah.
So closer to home, our cells are either in a state of growth or protection. So let's elaborate on that a little bit. And I'm going to ask for some of your specific expertise in this.
For sure.
On this biological cellular biology level, I don't know how much of your mojo is centered around that, but if I could go back to college, or I could, but I would get into cellular biology, but it would be like Bruce Lipton's version.
Oh, for sure. First thing, love Bruce's work. Love his work. It's actually, I think we talked about this before, Lori, where it's woven into my program. Actually, it's like one of the first things we talk about, especially when I'm teaching or talking about epigenetics. Right. Yeah. So this is the work that people are always kind of associating him with. But I think when you said the word analogy, it's more than that. It's not just an analogy. It's literally, I like to think about all these different aspects of ourselves as densities. I love that. I heard that word and I went, yep, I glommed right onto that, because this is our physical density of being. And then we've got the emotional body, the spiritual, all these different densities that actually just make up the whole. And when you talk about the cell, right? The cell is actually a density of the same thing going on in the emotion, in the intellect, in the universe. It's the same process happening, but we can just experience it in a different density. So when you talk about the cell and then the body, all the like being represented in them, it's actually existing in each one of these aspects of ourselves. So when we talk about, like, let's say hyperreactivity in the cell, which we could talk about that with the cell danger response, right? Like
Okay, so
Robert
talk about the
Navio's
cell
stuff.
danger response.
Sweet, because what's happening there is there's like danger. So it's the same thing in the nervous system: safe, not safe. So for safe, we can grow, we can like have time to integrate, we can procreate, we digest, we innovate, we do all those things because we're not in danger. Like, we don't have to put all these resources and energy into protection, right? So when we're not safe,
moving away from the stimulus, which is just
we're
like
not even
shut
planning
the doors and run.
Exactly. And we're not even planning for tomorrow. Who cares? If we're dead now, what does tomorrow mean? We're not planning. We don't have like all these.
That's not even the type of protection that facilitates what they call the immune system. That's not, it doesn't even use that protective mechanism. It's more like, let's get out of here. Let's just bar up everything and salvage what we have and just hold until we're in the clear. And we do this so often. And you were just saying that means we're not digesting, and we're not looking to procreate or procreating. We're not building new proteins for new cells, new walls, new machines. We're not doing that.
Exactly.
And I think it's easier for people that weren't into biology in school, and aren't gonna pick up, like, listening to us talk about the cell itself. Maybe it's easier to even talk about people. So like, look at the military. The military can be very self-sustaining. It's impressive what they do, how they bring in food and they bring in supplies no matter where they are. They're organized. They have like a chain of command, which is very important for that type of organism, that organization. And so when there is a certain type of attack on a unit, they can put all their energy into fighting back, distasteful as the whole battle scene is to me, or they can just like, let's get out of here, right? There's a word for it, retreat. Okay, so then they like just cover up and go, or maybe they hide. Okay, but they're not getting their lunch, they're not changing their socks, they're not resting well. Okay,
working out for building muscle so that they're strong for the next battle.
Building new tents, building new walls, fixing their vehicles, whatever that is. Our cells are they're no different. Our cells are factories that produce little machines called proteins, thousands and thousands of them, based on what is needed in the moment. And those proteins are made out of molecules that need to be quality. So here's your cell constantly being interrupted by a certain sort of stimulus that is perceived as a threat. And so it shuts down all normal functionings. It would be like if the Amazon distribution warehouse just said, everybody stop, and all the machines stopped because of some tornado that was coming. But what if this tornado was coming every day? So consider that. Like, Amazon would just be like a mess. But now, what if the tornado was thought to be coming every day, but it wasn't? And so our cells perceive things that aren't there sometimes. So we have these misperceptions. Our cells have these misperceptions that are very calamitous and inappropriate for the functioning of the cell. I would love for you to show to talk about how the person experiences this whole same experience.
Yeah. Well, and I love that actually a lot of the people in this field started to add that word perceived, like, so it's not like, it doesn't have to be an immediate threat with a bear. Like, it could be a perceived threat. And so in our life today, our modern world, we're like, okay, so we've got this whole nervous system that, assesses what's happening in our environment. So these threats, and then it goes like safe, not safe, and then it says, okay, not safe. Let's, the cells are doing all their stuff. Like you were just talking about, all those changes are being made. That's a catabolic process, because it's like burning up all this energy so that it can actually, so it's breaking things down so it can use it as energy. So we need to get away. We have to have more oxygen in our lungs, or breathing fast. We're like, heart rate's going up, our extremities, like we have all that energy goes to our extremities so we can run, we can fight, but it'll burn us out because it's going to happen over and over again in a lifestyle that has perceived threats, because we're not, the brain is like, okay, there's a threat here. It's not saying, well, this is a threat. And this is, sometimes we actually can train our brain to know this. But if we live in a constant state of fight or flight, we're constantly we actually take that things on as like being life and death, like being late for a soccer game. How many people have done that? Like said, oh, I'm gonna be late. And they get themselves all worked up, and it's like, it's soccer. Man. You're not going to die, but your body's like, oh, I'm going to die. This is a threat, la, la, la. And it's going down that catabolic road. Whereas we want to move it, swing that pendulum. Well, we don't really want a pendulum because we don't want to swing back and forth, but we want to be able to go into this safe, right? Like Bruce Lipton talks about, we're safe. We are able to be into this growth mode. Maybe we can kind of compare it to those two things that you were just talking about at the beginning. And I just want to say one thing about the CDR. We don't have to go into that. The cell danger response, that's the same response happening within the cell. Okay. So it's safe, not safe. The cell is actually responding in the same way that, our brain, nervous system, it happens at the cellular level. It happens at all those levels at the same time. So that's basically what's happening. I'm not going to go into all the science there, but if people want to look that up, that's what's going on. Autoimmunity, hyperreactivity, allergies, all that stuff is a reflection of that safe, not safe happening at the cellular level, right? So, yeah. And so going back to people, our daily lives, and you said we can be in protection mode or growth mode, same thing. If we are in the safe or the unsafe, we're in protection mode because we are trying to survive. If we are in the safe mode, we are in growth mode. And yes, Bruce Lipton is like totally on it when he says that we can't be in both at the same time. So the trick is to figure out what this protection mode is and what growth mode is, right? So which one are we in, and how do we live our lives or respond to life, those perceived threats, to move into growth rather than the protection, and use the protection when we need it, right? Yeah.
I have a real life anecdote for all this, and I'm going to use your pendulum on purpose. I think you were looking more of like a jungle vine where you want to get from that tree to that one.
Well, we don't want to just swing so widely, okay? Because it's always going to be one extreme or the other.
Admittedly have been pendulating for maybe 11 years. And it's from this idea that wasn't so radical that the economy was going to collapse, like entirely. And with it, a lot of other, unwelcome events on one level, right? So there's that word too, like unwelcome. But if we just welcomed whatever and opened our arms wide, or opened all the possibilities,
resistance is where the suffering is.
Like state of because you can actually prepare for something without shutting off all the other functions. But with us, I've reflected back from my own, so I'll just leave Jeremy out of it, but I do affect the family decisions, so it happened, right? So I pendulated between building a household based on worst case scenarios, which means not doing what I would have wanted to do instead, or buying what I wanted to buy instead, or investing in what I wanted to invest instead, spending time learning a certain thing. It was all a great deal. That time was spent on preparing for what if, which was a completely different course than preparing for my most preferential choices for also living an awesome, virtuous life that helped people in what if situations, including our own. But the other one was it's next week, man, we gotta have these things, we gotta do these things, we don't have time for those things, and we're gonna take our money that we would have spent on improving something, making it more beautiful, and put it in the stash of the whatever that stash was. So that was our protection. And over so many years, it was when we look at what we were trying to build here, this glorious artistic homestead, where are all the fence that's supposed to be up? Why is our cob house only, it's 12 feet tall now, but should have been done years ago, but we were hustling and saving, like we're having fun, but still, it wasn't it like if we had thought less about all the what ifs and and I'm not saying one was right and one was wrong, but you see the actions are different and the activity is different. So I'm not saying that what we did was wrong, but it was based on a perceived threat. Okay. And what I would have done otherwise would have been based on, even if the conditions of the threat were real, not to take it to a level that debilitated other growth functions. Because growth to me is expanding the homestead and in a thoughtful, carefully thought out way that's inspired.
Can I share something? I'm going to share something,
yes,
okay?
Please.
That might illustrate exactly what you're saying, Lori.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen, okay? Because this is what I do.
You can do
I make stuff. Yeah, I'm totally sharing it with you. Watch this. I'm just sharing the Canva version. Okay, so I make everything in Canva. I'm pulling back the curtain.
Canva's awesome.
I'm pulling back the curtain. What the wizard does here. I'm not even a wizard, but this is what I do behind the scenes. And I always make visuals for people because look at this, how this is what you're saying.
Did you just do this while we were talking?
No, I did it yesterday because I was on a bender. I was on a creative bender. Okay. Because I was in the safe growth mode. Okay. This is where I was at. I was in growth mode. So here's all the stuff you're talking about. This is what you're trying to articulate. What happens when we're in protection mode? We shrink because we're afraid because we're not allowing, we are like, it's actually a fear. It's fear-based. I mean, obviously, because fear, there's a reason for fear. I mean, we're not going to go walk up to a bear and shake its hand, a bear and its cub. Like that would be stupid. Like we have to, I mean, fear serves a purpose. Okay. But it's when we stay there, that's when we are debilitated. So protection mode, we shrink, right? We resist, right? And that's where suffering comes. We fracture. Because that resistance and stiffness, if anything happens to anything that's stiff, like a muscle, let's say, or children's bones are so malleable, right? Like they don't break as easily as we do because we're more rigid, right? If you're rigid, you break, you don't actually adapt. And stagnate, stay the same. This is actually expand and contract should be switched. See, I have a problem there. So it's supposed to say contract, and then the other side is expand. We become stuck. There's drama and the nervous system's just going whack. We don't make good decisions. There's lots of the emotion carries us away rather than informs us, right? And then it's fear-based. So here we are in growth mode. And these are the emotions and the states of being. We grow, we soften. I love yoga when it says with flow and softening into a yoga pose even, because instead of resisting it, that's where you injure yourself. If you soften into it, that's when you become more flexible. And this is not just an analogy.
It's the matrix where you avoid the bullet. Wow.
Sure. You know what? I did that once when I was dancing with my kids and my nieces and nephews. I swear, I was like, what? I'm doing this matrix move. It was so fun. It was the best ever.
Cool.
Right? And so instead of fracture, we remember ourselves. We put ourselves back together. So instead of stagnating, we evolve. Right? So this is what you're talking about. So if you had you're in growth mode, it's not about what ifs and I was wrong here and now I'm right. It's more how can I shift into this other state so that I have these outcomes, right? So it's expanding or flow, grace instead of drama. We have grace under fire, right? Not drama. It's not this big emotional outburst. Everybody's yelling, it's more I have grace under fire. This was not fun, but how am I going to have grace in this moment? And then fear and then trust and moving fear into trust. So that's kind of how I see that. When you talked about protection mode, growth mode, I'm thinking about Bruce and his teachings. And this is really a way to put this into real life, this is what the cell is doing. Sure. But this is how we're experiencing what that body's doing, what the nervous system what's happening there, all of that stuff is reflected in our experience. And so, and then when we have all of these experiences in the growth mode, this is what changes, like literally what you create, your house, your, I don't know, the relationships,
your family schedule,
yeah.
it's like your routine, those special moments where you're like, I'm so inspired to do role play with my family tonight after dinner. Like teenagers love it, they always do, and I'm inspired, you know, like that kind of upbeat motivation.
Yeah, and your experience of life, like the soccer game, for example, you're going to show up there in that protection mode, like totally. I mean, I actually had this happen. So for instance, like we used to be late for soccer all the time. That's why I use that as an example, because we were building a house. I was working 3/4 time. I was at the site at 9 o'clock in the morning after having worked since 5 o'clock in the morning at an academic position. And I brought my kids, so I was unschooling. We were unschooled. And I did all the contracting and like a ton of the building. We only had like my husband and I, he was working full time as well. And we had like literally 3 people helping us. We built a 1,500 square foot house on 1 floor. We built a 2-story. It was insane. And I was like traveling, taking this, I would go pick up all the supplies, like all that. Okay. So, and I have no idea. Okay. Now I have to remember my point. So we were, so yeah. So
inspired.
I have to remember the point now.
No, there is, because we were talking about an inspired routine, and you're like that.
Yeah,
coming from a place of that energetic, and you said late to soccer game.
Oh, I know what it was. So we were late for soccer constantly that whole season, right? Like, how are you supposed to be on time for anything? Like, and these things weren't even really that important, but they were, because they're important to my son, and it's important to the team that we're not going to be late and consistently. And I felt such guilt about it because I couldn't be everything to everybody. So we would go there, and I remember this one time we were late. It was only literally, it was like 5 minutes. And I'm like, I was going in this like drama mode, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm in fight or flight. I'm in panic mode. And I'm like apologizing. And then the coach just said, I said, we're just been so busy. I'm really sorry. And he said, we're all busy. Ooh. And he looks at me like this. And I was like, ooh, like that. And at first it was a lesson in like, you know, get out of the drama. It was kind of a jerk, but anyway, I mean, like a rude. Okay. But I mean, yeah, I got it. You know, I think he showed up in the same position. Like he was too busy. He was working lots, and he's, you know, volunteering his time to help these kids. And here we go. And we're like showing up late, like disheveled, and, you know, don't know what ends up. And I think had we both entered that event, like in this growth mode, we would have had a much different experience of that. Neither one would have been in drama in this whole, like our relationship would have been better, like the exchange between the two of us. Yeah. And the experience of being late wouldn't have caused all this catabolic responses, and we wouldn't have shown up like, you know, like having to like unwind after. My son would have had a better time of it. He wouldn't have had like residual issues with being late places, you know, because they hate that. Right. Et cetera, et cetera. Our experience would have been completely different, I think. Yeah.
I get what you're saying, because both of you might have actually found a great deal of appreciation in one another instead.
I think, yeah. And maybe, like I said, grace, understanding,
well, to know
like connection, we would have connected there.
And fully, you know, full of things to do every day. You could see each other as saying, wow, that's a busy person who's not lazy, who obviously it's important to them to, they've got a lot of ideas apparently, and they're needed in a lot of places. That person's needed all over the place. Like to see each other that way, yep. Being like selfish because they're late, you know. Yeah. I want to go back to epigenetics for a moment and see if we can paraphrase what epigenetics is, and I'll try first, and then you
sure
fill in the blanks. But epi meaning outside of, right? Like exo above, and epi is outside of the genes. So for a long time, and even still, genes are given the credit for creating our bodies in various conditions that we say are like genetically inherited issues,
right?
And yet all that genes are, and actually they're not all, and this is the way Bruce says it. Bruce says that all that they are is blueprints, but I also know that they are full of energy and memory, and they're like crystalline and ancient. Okay.
Totally.
And I think they contain memories, but
Mhm.
on one way to understand them though, is they are a blueprint, like blueprints sitting on a table. They don't talk, they don't move. They are there for like, they're read only.
Right.
And now saying that, we could edit them too, but they don't edit themselves unless they do. Don't know that yet. And but they don't move and they don't turn themselves on and off. They are made available when they are made readable, when a protein sleeve retracts out of the way so that they are visible, and then the RNA and everything else just starts doing its thing. It comes along and reads the DNA and it says, we need this type of protein right now. And they read the instructions and they make those particular kinds of proteins that were needed, and so on and so forth. But epigenetics doesn't describe that so much. It describes what's creating that protein sleeve to move. When are new proteins like needed? What triggers this whole process and says, all right, it's time to do a thing, a cellular function, if you will. And it has, within the cell, it has to do with the information it's reading in the environment, which could be threat signals or non-threatening signals, right? So various hormones might just like tell that cell, okay, it's time to procreate, or various, I don't know, just something. And, but as a person, we are perceiving our environment, and this actually goes down to the cellular level. He spends like 3 hours in one book and 8 hours in another book explaining this. I'm trying to do it quickly and beautifully, without, because I mean, obviously, if you could do it this quickly, he wouldn't have written these books on it. But the whole idea is the cell has a perception of its environment and acts upon that. But we have a perception of our environment, which creates that chemical environment, because we perceive something with our eyes, ears, nose, skin. We get cold, okay? And then we perceive that it's cold, or we perceive that forest fire is too cool. I'm always going back to a threatening situation. We perceive that we love our friend that walks into the room, and it creates a chemical response in our body, which is a miracle in itself, that we think something. And I don't mean miracle as in like unworldly. I mean like totally us, totally believable, totally truth. Okay. So our mind, of course, creates reality. Anyway, we think something, a chemical event occurs, it envelops these cells, the cells perceive the chemical in their environment, and then they begin a certain function based on that. But it's what we perceive in our environment that creates the environment that the cell then is enveloped in. So epigenetics is about our perceptions of our life, creating the triggering the mechanisms and the functions on a cellular level at minimum. I mean, there's so much more to say, but it's beyond the DNA epigenetics. Now how would you describe epigenetics?
No, I love how you said that DNA is read-only information. True. It's true. And we all have this information, but so what we need to understand about DNA is that it's not fixed. Like the outcome in our health, or how the cells respond, or how we respond and experience that, is not fixed. So what happens is that, and so what happens when, I know I'm not really with the blueprint idea necessarily. I suppose, he's saying that some people used to explain it like where a gene is flipped on or off. And I think both are happening. The blueprint is read and this is flipped on or off depending on what we need. I love how you said that, Lori. It's very well explained. So what's going on there is that the DNA is not like, this is not fixed. It's responsive. So our bodies are so we're responding depending on the inputs of our environment, and those inputs plus our perception of them is what triggers the body to do what it needs to do according to the information it has. So it's like, I need this. I need chapter 3, because chapter 3 is about toxic environment, and this is how I'm going to respond to chapter 3, because I'm perceiving that this toxic environment, and plus my perception is that it's dangerous for me. So I'm going to create this response in my body or my emotional body. So and then the point of realizing that is that DNA, and it's not about destiny, or sorry, it's not about fate. Sorry, it's not fated that we can test for a specific gene and you're going to have breast cancer, and we're going to test for this gene and you're going to have this. And all the percentages and all those like predictions, those are just literally like, I don't want to say guesses, but it's definitely not fate. It's not fate. We have all the choice in that, depending on first the inputs we expose ourselves to. And that is not just the physical environment, it's also the mental environment, the emotional environment, like what stuff we read, what ideas we're exposing ourselves to and our children to, or that and then it's our perception of them. So that's why I'm such an advocate of, critical thought, and I don't mean criticizing, I mean literally like thinking about stuff, and does this make sense to me? And then also just treating our bodies and our spaces as a temple, because like we're not garbage cans, and we don't need to live in a chaotic like kind of toxic environment. So we're making those decisions, and it's also about the perception. So we can't be dogmatic either, like be afraid of everything. Like, oh my gosh, I just walked through this, like there's a whole bunch of cell towers. Yeah, that's not great, but we can't be going around perceiving it as like our world is completely dangerous and we have to hide in our basements. Like that doesn't work either. So it's a combination of things where we have grace. We're in that growth mode where we can assess with like a level head, and we can expand without fear, because we're not, having these expectations, but we're more open to the possibility of what could be, because we know that our DNA and whatever is happening for us now is never fixed. We have all the control over what happens tomorrow, right? If we understand epigenetics and this whole, if we understand that. I
think it's important then to bring up this critical point. What if our conceptions or perceptions are false? I would like think of preconception, because what if our perceptions are false and they are misconceptions? Then,
well, the crazy thing about that is none of it is, because we make it reality. Like that's going pretty deep, but it's true.
So that's the answer. We make our perceptions.
We make
true.
Our reality.
And so what is frightening out there becomes a frightening situation in our bodies. But more palatably, what if we perceive that there is a stressor out there, like your boss or your relationship or something, even a good stressor sometimes is a bad stressor, your body will use resources or preferentially send energy to a certain area in preparation for this thing that you've created in your mind, maybe not for your best benefit, and it actually is a detriment to your overall functioning and well-being because of it. So if you have an example for that on a body level, because I know
well, for sure. I mean, I think that I actually have another infographic for that, but I'm not going to show you. But it's like I like to think of. I don't have it pulled up yet, okay. But the thorn. I think of it like these as thorns, okay? And also, like, yes, the perception is important. Some things are literally like just. I mean, you could go all the way down to know that it's all about perception. Yet we have, like, it's almost like we have to shift sometimes a little slower so that it makes sense to us. Because sometimes, like, for us to go right to like, oh, everything's about how we perceive stuff. So I'm going to perceive everything XYZ, and I'm going to do a bunch of hypnosis, and I'm going to do a bunch of manifesting, and everything's going to be exactly the way I think I should perceive it. Well, that's not actually really part of your human evolution either, because it's like you're skipping too many parts. It's like you have to learn to crawl, and then you learn to stand, and then you walk.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to go through those processes to actually have it make sense. So what I do, okay, so I plant seeds of thought. So this is what I do. I know I keep talking about this shift method, but it's
I'm gonna
literally
talk about
like
your shift method if you don't.
yeah, well, I mean, this is it. And I'm going to use the one example. Okay. So, so first you can decide whether you want, these are choices. You said about perception. A perception is a choice. Am I going to choose to see, and people see this all the time, the glass half empty, or is it half full?
Mhm.
And then beyond that, it's overflowing, and that's a knowing. Like, so you move from like what you're going to choose to see, how you're going to choose to see it. And it's a practice. So you're like working this muscle, because we can be conditioned into the negative, into the shrink, the, fragment, the fractured, the smallness of being afraid all the time, because we are conditioned into that. I mean, we live in an environment that's full of like danger, and like pushing and cajoling and manipulation, because many different reasons for that, but we don't want to live there. And so it's a choice. Like, am I going to go and watch CNN, or am I going to watch this documentary that's going to enlighten me? And so this is where the discernment comes in. I'm going to choose this life, this way of being, this thought process that makes me feel calm, makes me feel powerful at the same time. It's like that peaceful warrior, makes me feel capable, empowers me, right? Doesn't bully me, allows me to make my own choices. Like, these are choices that we make. And so we choose. It's all about choice. So and then we actually automatically perceive things differently. Informed, for sure. And again, the discernment muscle is super important. And I also think taking out that thorn. What is it that's agitating you? What are you trying to cover up? What are you trying to band-aid? What's, and then like just literally opening it up to, it's hard to talk about truth as if it's like one thing, because we all have our own truths, but finding like what the root causes really are for us. And maybe it's not like everything in our environment. We don't need to be afraid of it. That's the problem, is being afraid of taking off the Band-Aid and seeing what that thorn actually is, because it's going to mean that you have to make some choices. Am I going to take this out? Am I going to quit that job? What is that thorn? Am I going to actually have to move? Or maybe I don't. That's not actually the problem. The problem is more emotional, or it's how I'm perceiving it that is the issue, right? Like, so there's so many different things, and it's different for everybody. But as soon as you start opening, like, you become open to opening your eyes and seeing these things, that's when everything starts to, like I said, shift. It all starts to shift. And one idea I even said to my niece one day, I said, fear, like just shift that fear into curiosity. And she was like, days later, she was like, Auntie, I can't stop thinking about what you said about fear and curiosity. It's coming up for me over and over again. So it's like planting seeds and allowing those seeds to take root in you, that you choose. You go ahead, dig up the weeds, I love weeds anyway, but like dig up the ones that are going to choke everything out, because we don't want that. If it's going to start making you go down that road of fear and of protection and all that stuff when it's not necessary, then pull it out. Right. And then choose some plant it, and then be open to the new ones. Be open to those seeds that are going to get you where in your health and your mental and emotional state that you choose to be, that you choose where you want to go with this.
Your shift method helps people shift their perceptions to shift their health and overall well-being.
Yep. Yeah. Shift how you think, shift how you feel, shift how you do, and then shift how you be. For sure. That's it in a nutshell.
And this is the backbone of like most of your programs, and there's several, and they're curated for heads of families, for the family unit, and for the professionals. And for those that want to know what the professionals know, like on the fundamental
on that level.
Yeah.
For sure.
They're out there, and you have two websites that we look at the most, is the healthyfamilyformula.com and Carla
Yeah.
Atherton inspired.com. And they're
Mhm.
both like wonderful websites to visit. If anyone goes there and is overwhelmed by all the gorgeous information that's there or where to go, please reach out here, wherever you're seeing this, and use the contact information below, around, next to, whatever, to reach out to either Carla or I. She's a personal counselor. She has individual private coaching lessons with individuals, but what we're trying to do is create more group experiences, because those are have an individual vibe to them that is just like excellent all around when you're in a group. A lot of people want to come into this privately and have Carla all to themselves, but tell you, the group programs are where it's at.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's really, the whole initiative is to change a consciousness. So, and for the better, it's not so that, oh, my way or the highway. It's literally to open everything up from any sort of like just conditioning into out of the I can'ts into the I cans, or like, out of I will into I am. Like, this is our truth. This is what everybody can have is health, balance, passion, purpose. It's really just takes like planting some seeds and holding space for all these, everybody. And so this is what I want to see happen for, and this is what I keep talking about. Like, if you go to my websites, there's tons of interviews and stuff like that. Like, I just can't stop talking about this whole piece of empowerment. And yeah, you can't, and yeah, you will. As you put the thought in, you put the focus to this, and that it's like a runaway train, man. Like, you just hop on and let's go.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we promised we'd keep it abridged, or just, and I have to bring Marshall lunch now.
All right.
School down
Sounds
the road.
good.
Wonderful. It was great to see you. And, she's a friend of mine. Okay. So we just get together and we talk, and then sometimes we record it. So here we are.
Okay.
All right. Love you, girls.
Lori.
See you next time.
All right.
Bye
Okay.
for now.
Bye-bye.